What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. And if you've watched any of the videos, which I know we're still kind of getting off the ground and didn't get a lot of viewership, so some of you watched it, we actually looked at Craigslist listings and whether they were really serious as to what the prices were that they were asking for them. And we saw some ridiculous stuff up there. I mean, we saw $8,500 systems that they were asking that much for a system that really didn't even book out at a third or even a quarter of what they were asking. A $23,000 system. Never heard it back from the guy with the $23,000 system, so I'm assuming that that's probably not a typo. And of course the $3,000 system with an unknown whether you're going to get a graphics card or not. But in all of that, we actually saw and looked at one listing that was actually a very good listing. $500 for a system. And we'll take a look at it here. It was an i9 9600K with a 2060, a GTX 2060 Zotac graphics card. Air-cooled black case. It had a hard disk drive, I think 1 terabyte hard disk drive, and 128 gigabyte SSD, 2.5 inch, I believe it was. And then some RGB fans and things like that. Well, after I did that video, eBay contacted me letting me know that the price was lowered, and it was lowered down to $485. Now, generally looking, the cost of an i9 9600K is still, somewhat relatively up there, and it's still a very viable chip. The case didn't really have any good pictures of the case or the fans, just a interior shot, but everything was said to be in working order. The graphics card, currently right now, the graphics card is selling anywhere between, about $140 to $190 used. And then of course the hard disk drive, really not a huge value there. The SSD is only 128 gigs, not a huge value there, but for the most part the chip and the graphics card are probably the most valuable things, which definitely made up for the price I was asking. We priced it out, and if you'd built the system brand new, it would have been probably an $1,150 system if I remember correctly. Well, once the price actually lowered, I went ahead and I bought it. So this is it. This is actually the system here. I haven't opened it yet. It just came UPS today. The box is definitely a little worse for wear. So I really haven't heard any glass shattering sounds or anything like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of condition this is in here, and be able to take a look to see exactly how much punishment it got put through by UPS. So we're going to take a look at it and see what we got, and then we'll see what kind of condition it's in. All right, got my little credit card box cutter here, and let's see. All right, and if you can see inside the top of this here from the overhead shot, we've got some bubble wrap, which is actually pretty good. We've got the power cable. All right, so I heard something rolling around in there taking this out, so that concerns me a little bit. So we got the power cable, and hearing that does not give me a whole vote of confidence. We got some damage on the back here by the graphics card. I don't think that was caused by the box. It's hard to tell. The card does not look to have any damage as of right now, but we'll get a better look at it once we get in there and take it out of the expansion slot and see how it's doing. You can definitely see that damage there by the expansion slot and see what's going on with that. And actually looking at the right side panel, this is actually bowing out. Cable management needs some definite work here. So I know that I believe he said that he had built this for gaming and just wasn't gaming anymore, like I said, but it looks like we've got definitely some work to do on the cable management side. We've got the RGB set up. It's got a thermal take fan header here. Fans, we've actually got the 128 gigabyte SSD here mounted on the back. The hard drive is in there. It's got an EVGA power supply. All right, so we've got this one screw back here that is really badly cross-threaded. Oh, okay, so it was the missing expansion slot cover that was bouncing around in here, so that's good. At least we've got that. So basically in here, we do have a Cooler Master air cooler here. He's got it actually exhausting out to the top and out the top of the system. And then, of course, he's got the one rear 120 millimeter fan. We've got 3 thermal take fans on the front And then of course that one's going to be a thermal take. And then we have an EVGA 600 watt BR, and we got Gigabyte Z390 UD motherboard. Everything actually looks in pretty good shape. That graphics card is like bent up, and I think it's because that expansion slot is messed up. Oh, that is not even in the PCIe slot. What the? Now, I don't know if he did this because of the shipping. We definitely have the damaged expansion slot here. It looks like he almost cut the cross member out. I'm not sure why you would do that. Here where the card fits, and then the expansion slot cover that was floating around in the case is the one from here. So we have that. But the card was not even in the PCIe slot in shipping, and it was just connected here at the expansion slot. So it was just bouncing around on here. Now I'm not seeing any damage that I can tell to the PCIe slot, but we're definitely going to need to check that out and test it, and test out this card to make sure that it's still working. It didn't get damaged in shipping. All right, so the graphics card is out. Taking a look at it, I don't see any damage on the PCB or anything like that. It looks like maybe he had purposely put it in that way for shipping, so that it didn't get jostled around. I don't think that's a tremendous idea, just because of the way it would be bouncing and vibrating. There wasn't anything inside the case to stabilize everything, so this would have been vibrating all over the place. So this very well could be a damaged card, which we'll have to take a look at to verify whether it's working or not. All right, so we do have Corsair Vengeance LPX RAM DDR4 3000 megahertz, which, you know, not ideal for an Intel build with an i9 with a 9600K. Cable management inside the case is much like the back. It definitely needs some work and some help. We're going to go ahead and put this graphics card in and see how it goes with the testing before we clean it up, repaste it, and see what we can do with getting a little bit of performance out of it. All right, so here comes the part that we all fear. If this blows up, my neighbor's going to hate me. Ah, power's on. We got RGB lights. Fan is spinning. See if we get a signal. Ah, we got a post. Memory is actually running at 2133 megahertz, so we do have to set the XMP on that to make sure that we're getting the full 3000 out of it. We'll have to check for a BIOS update, because I would imagine that he probably didn't update the BIOS before shipping it. We do have an all data SSD that's 128 gigs. That's the boot drive, which it should be. And then we have our hard disk drive as the secondary drive. Now, preferably, I would prefer having some fans on top and rotating that cooler around so that it's blowing out the back. Definitely, I think airflow would benefit from that. In the current configuration with one fan back here, then the fan on the cooler blowing up, it's not hurting anything. I don't think airflow is going to be horribly suffering. For front I/O, of course, we've got a USB 3, USB 2, two USB 2s, and then we have actually a dedicated RGB button. So this is direct RGB. So this isn't even ARGB. It just changes based on that button there. And then, of course, we got the reset button and power switch and auxiliary and aux input, or aux headphone jack and a mic input. And here we go. We're actually into Windows. So it looks like he did reset it. All right, so with this thermal take case, one thing while I'm loading Furmark and Cinebench on it to kind of run it through some tests is the cooling ability of this air cooler is going to be very limited. We've got the solid tempered glass panel there, and then we've got the solid acrylic front here, and we've got 3 good fans running behind that, but the only place it can pull air out of is here on this side. And this is very, very restrictive. You can feel it pulling the air in. It is just going to be surprising to see what the thermals are running on this 9600K. And I'd be very surprised if it's not running a little bit warm. But we'll see. All right, so we're back here a couple days later, and well, I had to take a break on this because of the fact that this is an older Z390 board by Gigabyte. And when messing around with the RGB fans, which definitely I'm a fan of RGB, and I much prefer having it in there than not having it, because you always have the option, if you're not an RGB fan, you can just turn them off. The Z390 board that's in here only has a 4-pin header. Now, the majority of everything we have in here is actually 5 volt, where the 4-pin is 12 volt. So what we ended up having to do was we actually got from Easy DIY, which is the manufacturer of the fans that I put in here and the manufacturer of the hub, is we actually ended up getting this. And this, there'll be a link to this in the comments here. This is for working with older boards that don't have a 5 volt header on it for RGB. What this actually does is it will take the 12 volt power coming from the 4-pin connection, and then it will convert it down to 5 volts and convert that 4-pin connection into a 3-pin, so you can run your fans in there if you have that 5 volt conversion. It runs off of SATA power, so it does add one additional thing in there that we gotta run off of SATA, but it also comes with the splitter so that we can still go in and our air cooler fan, which is a Cooler Master fan, can plug in separately as well, and everything should work without problem there. We still have to hook up the front I/O on this, which we'll get to here as we tidy up some of this, and then we'll get in and connect everything else up, get the graphics card in, and then we'll retest it. And I will say that one thing with this Thermaltake case, even though I'm not a big fan of its airflow pattern, it does give quite a few spots on here to be able to cable manage. It actually has a lot of different tie-down points right here. I know it may be a little difficult to see on camera, but there are more than adequate number of tie-down points to put zip ties through and be able to clean up this wiring so that it's a little bit better presentation on the back. All right, so what we're going to do before we do any more cable management, we're going to go ahead and get our front I/O connected, and that's going to be our 24 full pin, our that's going to be our 24 pin, as well as our USB and all of our audio and our front I/O panel pins, and that's going to be pretty simple here, but once they're actually connected, we'll be able to better manage the cables on the back. So we've got our 24 pin that we actually ran through the side hole there, and we're just going to put that right there on the motherboard. Make sure that clips in. We've got our USB 3.0 right here, which we're going to plug into this. You want to make sure that the keyed slot is in the right place. As far as that goes in, we'll pull that slack in through when we do some cable management. But the one thing I don't like about this motherboard is it doesn't extend all the way out to the outer standoffs. It's actually a little slimmer, which gives it a little bit too much flex on this board, I think. You know, we'll deal with it and we'll go from there. What else we have here is down here on this side, we have our audio and our USB 2.0. You'll actually see that with these, the difference is where that little blocked out pin is going to determine which header that it goes into here. So we can see that actually on the bottom left side, the second one in is missing, so that's going to be our audio. So we're going to go ahead and plug our audio in there. And that means that this one with the top left one missing is going to be our USB, and we're going to go ahead and plug it into our USB header. All right, there's that. Now, that leaves us with our front panel connectors. And that's going to be this bunch of wires. With this, you really want to refer to the motherboard manual. As far as, especially with these older ones, they don't always use a common connection. And the other nice thing is that the motherboard will have on it a printed kind of ledger as to what goes where. And you can just follow that. On this, it's actually color coded as well, so we want to find our LED. All right, so our power LED is going to go into the yellow ones here, according to that diagram. Our hard disk drive light is going to actually go just below that, and then our reset switch is going to go right next to our hard disk drive light on this one. Our power switch is going to go just above that. Front I/O is actually all hooked up now. We're going to go ahead and get this cable managed up, pull that slack back, and get the fans all hooked up. Okay, so we've got all of the cable management done in the back as far as what we're going to do at this point. And it looked halfway decent. We got a picture here of it, but definitely not my best work. Okay, so for the most part, we've got all of the RGB wired and ran. We did have to add that extra component in with the 12 volt to 5 volt converter. We got that wired up. We're going to be testing that here after we get this going, but we got all the cable management done about as far as what it can be done with the additional components that we had put in. But we're going to go ahead and get the GPU in, cover up some of these other expansion slots, and then we're going to give this a test. All right, so we're just going to slide this into the slot here. And then we're going to put the extra expansion slot cover in here just to cover up that open. All right, and then we bound up the extra pigtail here on the graphics card just so it has a little cleaner finished look to it. And we're going to go ahead and put on the cover. So we set up the CPU fan we're going to set up for its normal, most common curve, basically ramping up as needed. And that's going to be done through the BIOS. It should already be set to that. As far as the other case fans, we can actually control it through the remote control if we want to get more cooling out of it. But connecting them to an internal fan header is not an option because of that box that's set up. It's all set to be done remotely. Not a huge fan of that kind of setup. I would much rather have it connected to the motherboard and the motherboard changing it. But this controller, for some reason, doesn't have that option. So it does start up. Fans are all running. We put a couple of extra LED strips in there. And it looks like we have some control through the controller box here as far as the LEDs, because this conversion box does have a controller. All right, so here we are. We got a boot out of it, so everything is working well. We've got all of our RGB fans are on and synced to the motherboard setting that we've been able to set due to the MB button on the remote, so that is good. They all match. You can control the lighting of everything but the CPU cooler through the remote as well too, but hitting that motherboard button will actually sync them all up. Aside from that, we're into the Gigabyte BIOS here. We can actually go in here and check to make sure that the RAM is all set. All right, so here we are. We can actually see that we're getting the full 3600 megahertz of RAM. And so we are getting the full speed of that. The BIOS is all good to go. Now, I will check later to see if there's a BIOS update needed for this motherboard, but right now I think we're all good and set to go. So we'll go ahead and we will boot to Windows. All right, so it looks like by putting that little easy DIY box in the back of this to bypass the 12 volt and cut it down to a 5 volt thing, we've actually lost motherboard control. So be aware of that if you decide to do this. But the control box that it is, you can change the pattern and sync all the lights through the control box directly. Was buying a PC off of eBay at $500 for an i5 9600K with the Zotac Gaming 2060 worth it. I would say definitely. I mean, with the price reduction that the guy gave me, as well as the shipping, I think I paid total out of pocket about $550, and that was after the shipping. And then with cleaning it up, repasting everything, and putting these different fans in, price-wise, as far as what's worth is right around or just under $1,000. Actually, PC Part Picker, not including the easy DIY fans, which are about $30, came to $984. So right about $1,000 with those fans. So overall, definitely a very well-running machine. This case was actually still available on PC Part Picker, surprisingly. And this is actually a $70 case. Cleaned up the back where the damage was on the expansion port to get rid of the sharp points that were on there, get that piece pulled out that was just partially removed, and clean that all up. But I mean, typically, I think for what they were asking for it, I mean, yeah, I think it was a very reasonable price, $500 after the reduction, $485, and then the shipping. I would say I definitely got my money's worth. So if you pay attention to the ads and do your due diligence and research them, it can actually come out working very well, much as it did in this case. And that's about it for this video. I want to thank everybody for joining us and seeing how we can make out with buying something off of eBay. Don't forget, keep an eye out for other videos coming along with other builds and such. And visit darkhourpc.com, where you can get your next gaming PC at a very decent price and built to your specs, or even a custom build. We appreciate all the support and everything out there, and I appreciate you guys supporting the channel. But we're going to wrap this one up and hope you guys have a great day and enjoy the new year.